At some point, we've all been the new guy at work. Everyone is rushing around and getting things done, seemingly in their element, while you stumble aimlessly and feel incompetent. In most cases, this passes pretty quickly. You catch on. But it isn't quite so simple for the protagonist of today's story. We follow a nurse on his first neonatal assignment. But there's something strange about the doctor who comes in to deliver the babies. And there's something even stranger about the babies themselves. This is Cosmic Goblins, a podcast specializing in cosmic horror, dark fantasy, and all things weird fiction. I'm your host, Alex Wolfgang. Today's story is Baker's Dozen by R.L. Meza, and it was first published just weeks ago in the January issue of Cosmic Horror Monthly. This one is short and sweet, just under 2,000 words, but the amount of lore it packs into this runtime is remarkable. Stick around after the story for a quick chat with the author. Let's get started. Cosmic Goblins presents Baker's Dozen by R.L. Meza. According to head nurse Tildy, the village women took pregnant in batches, and I was only being offered the temporary position because no one else had applied. Despite her conducting the interview like a dissection, a male nurse? How odd. I accepted the job. I'd been laughed out of everywhere else. And, like Nurse Tildy, I lacked options. I needed experience, an opportunity to prove myself. I assumed, like any rational person, that the births would be strung out. But, as a cold spring wind lashed the tiny, faded village atop the rocky island, bending scrubby trees back and stirring the wildflower bushes, the pregnant women arrived at the hospital together at noon. A dozen, ages 16 to 33. Our team of 7 nurses, led by Tildy, tucked the women into beds lining the long room. We made them as comfortable as possible, considering the facility's modest size and antiquated equipment, while the rain splashed against the windows as if thrown from buckets, and the roof leaked in earnest. Tildy ordered me to soak up the drips, runnels, and puddles on the tiled floor before someone slipped. So I scurried about with buckets, bedpans, and towels, trying to staunch the water's invasion without bumping into anyone or bruising myself on bed corners, and failing. A crab scuttled away from my mop. Were the waves breaking on the hospital? I scooped something like a starfish with toothy jaws into a bucket, stuffed wet towels on top, more concerned with returning to the pair of women I'd been assigned to. I had yet to meet the island's doctor when a dozen waters broke, and the women all went into labor at once. Their collective moan drowned out the whistling wind and the surf's violent crashing. Tildy informed me the doctor would arrive when they were ready to push, to guide us through the birthing process. But as the moan swelled like a blood bubble, bursting into separate cries, I began to worry. In my desperation to be hired, I had overstated my qualifications. My intentions were good. I only wanted to help people and be taken seriously in my efforts. Tildy frowned at me. "You lied," she said. "This is your first delivery." Lightning flashed, followed by a distant boom of thunder. The cries melded back into communal agony. Fists gripped handrails and knotted sheets. Surrounded by sweating red faces and gasping lungs and gritted teeth, I must have looked awful. Nurse Tildy read the answer in my face. I'd never seen a live birth. "Well," she said, like she'd won a bet against me. "Too late now." Another nurse called for clean towels, and Tildy pushed me toward her, adding, "Try not to vomit or faint." Easier said than done, breaching that sharp musk of adrenaline and body odor, with its underlying iron scent summoning images of blood-slicked predator muzzles. I'd never seen a battlefield either, but as the thunder boomed closer, like cannon fire, the walls quaked, and I pictured us at war against unseen forces that sought to claim these innocent women and their children. My duty was to see them through the storm. I ignored my tired feet and aching head, assisting where I could. The women screamed and whimpered, cursed me and their husbands, and then their husbands' boats and fishing nets, their sails, even the anchors. I'd never heard such viciously creative phrasing. I prayed my good intentions would grant me immunity from their venom. Tildy, however, seemed perfectly willing to use me as her human shield, as she stalked between the beds like an admiral, barking orders to restrain thrashing limbs, to check cervix dilation and report back. Shortly after 3 a.m, the hospital lost power. Tildy lit 13 lanterns and passed them around, keeping one for herself. A knock came at the main door, cutting through the howling wind, the hail pelting the windows. Tildy ushered inside a short, bulky figure so thickly wrapped in layers they shuffled, hood drawn, face swaddled in what I first mistook for tangled scarves, until lantern light revealed wet folds of kelp. No one appeared disturbed by the doctor's unusual trappings, the hollow rattle of shell and bones caught in salt-stiffened netting. The doctor's hand was small in mine when we shook, clammy and fleeting, like a slick eel grabbed by accident and loosed with a shiver of revulsion. Beneath their layers, the doctor might have been stooped with age or stunted in growth. They hunched, 4 feet tall. In lieu of a traditional doctor's bag, they carried a fishing tackle box. Tildy announced it was time to push. Lantern raised high, she led the doctor to each bed in turn, as an orderly left a trail of towels in their wake to soak up the doctor's seepage. If left to dry, the moisture rolling off the doctor crystallized into child-sized boot prints that crunched underfoot. When the doctor reached the pair of panting, grunting, straining women in my care, the short figure burrowed beneath the sheets tinted over Mrs. Lockney's knees, to my left, while Tildy turned her back as if standing guard. A loud, prolonged sniff came from beneath the sheet. The doctor emerged to search the tackle box. Then a curved metal hook filled their gloveless palm. Their nimble fingers attached a wire leader and braided line, before they ducked back under the sheet. Mrs. Lockney's screams intensified at the flurry of movement between her legs. The doctor ducked out, waved me closer, and gave me the line to hold. I regarded Mrs. Lockney in mild shock. Her pained cries were subsiding into moans, and the relief in her expression prevented me from objecting. There wasn't time for questions. My other patient's exam was similar. Burrowing, sniffing, then into the tackle box dipped the doctor's hands, still smeared with Mrs. Lockney's fluids. The doctor removed a collapsible wire mesh trap used for lobsters and crabs. They baited the trap with meat scraps, positioned it between Katie Westfield's legs, and left me holding the anchor rope, with the 16-year-old staring up at me in bewilderment, like we were the only 2 sane people in the room. Where was the stethoscope? Why wasn't the doctor wearing gloves? Another loud sniff from under the next bedsheet in line, and the doctor gave the nurse to my right, whose name I've since forgotten, a short spear. Mrs. Lockney's line jerked taut, whizzing through my left hand, burning, then biting into my palm as I made a fist. Whatever was hooked on the end nearly yanked my arm from its socket. The spear nurse tittered. "Look alive, Captain," she said. "What is this?" I asked her. "I don't understand." Her look told me I wouldn't, or shouldn't, perhaps. I focused on the braided line in my left hand and the trap rope in my right. I would bring Mrs. Lockney and Katie Westfield through this, alive, with their offspring intact. I would not picture the tools used to accomplish this, but trust the doctors and nurses to guide my actions, though reason insisted we'd left medical science behind. The pregnant women fell silent in unison. Something greater was at play now. My arms buzzed softly through the air as I adjusted my hold on the line and the rope. My hairs stood erect, scalp tingling as if a hand with millipedes for fingers stroked me from nape to forehead. I'm not ashamed to admit, I pissed myself. A force observed me from the darkness congealed in the rafters, or from the maelstrom beyond, or from within my own mind's eye, inescapable. I was instrumental, a string deaf to its plucking, a cog blind to the machine, I was flesh and blood pathetic, so soft and so breakable. I could only hope to please this thing to survive its attention. The other nurses, however, seemed unruffled as the doctor moved to the head of the long room, with the heavy wooden entrance doors behind. The doctor's arms came up like a conductor's. The floor rocked underfoot. A wave crashed against the windows behind my patients, and they ducked lower in their beds with muffled screams. Shadowy creatures streaked the glass. I swear the presence above us crowded closer, a wolf breathing hot on its felled prey's neck, as the doctor spoke a convoluted word. Head nurse Tildy repeated it for the room, and I understood how to replicate the sounds, though its meaning remained elusive. When the doctor spoke the word again, we nurses and our charges responded with Tildy's translation. Tildy visited me long enough to say, "You will pull when the doctor's arms come down. Do not stop until the babies have crossed." She said nothing of my piss-stained clothes, and as I glanced about, I saw other nurses in similar states of disarray. Still, when the doctor's arms came down, the pregnant women braced, and we nurses choked up on our fishing gear. While I pulled with all my might, leaned backward, arms quivering, the spear nurse beside me took aim and stabbed beneath her charge's sheet. I cried out at the blood splatter, or meant to. I shouted the same word the doctors had been repeating. Nothing else would come out but that word. A name, 4 syllables, sometimes 5. In my mind, the nurse had speared the infant, and if my eyes confirmed this, then nothing would prevent me from fleeing into the storm. I hadn't come here to fish for unborn children. Yet that's exactly what I did. Katie Westfield's baby came first. The trap shot out from between her legs so fast it would have struck the bed across the aisle, had Tildy not materialized to catch it. The infant caught within suckled on the wad of bait, but otherwise appeared healthy. "Why isn't he crying?" I asked. "Why would he?" said the spear nurse. She stood behind Tildy, cradling unscathed twins. As the babies came, Tildy spirited them off to a separate room. Their mothers showed no indication they wanted to meet their offspring. This might have struck me as strange, were I not preoccupied with wrestling Lockney's child free from her womb. Reeling in the shark line myself proved impossible. Either the line was snagged, or the baby was stuck. The doctor approached us. Mrs. Lockney's baby was the last, and the room's attention swung toward the line wrapped around my hands and arms, my twitching muscles and sweat-soaked shirt. The doctor beckoned to me. "Speak," Tildy said. The word came from my lips. The doctor shook their lumpen head and gestured, and Tildy said, "Bend down and repeat it." When I obeyed, speaking to the kelp mask with its glittering onyx eyes, the doctor reached up to pinch my lower lip, manipulating the word ever so slightly, an added breathiness. The correct utterance was orgasmic in its accuracy. I called it out again, louder, and the line in my hands went slack. I reeled, repeating the name, tears flooding my vision as wave after wave spilled over the hospital's windows, causing dawn's colors to run like ruined paintings, pinks bleeding into grays, bruised plum, cold blues. Mrs. Lockney's baby was the last, but it was coming. Together, we helped the 13th being cross into our world. By noon, the sun shone bright, and the baker's dozen no longer resembled anything human. They were perfect. Hello, RL. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I'm excited to talk about Baker's Dozen, but before we get into the story, I just wanted to ask a little bit about you and your writing journey. You know, how you got into it, how long you've been writing, that kind of thing.
I graduated, I think, 2018 with my bachelor's, and that's when I really started creative writing professionally. And yeah, since then, that's pretty much what I've been doing full time, working with speculative fiction.
Gotcha. Has horror always been a central part of that, or do you kind of dabble in various genres?
Horror more so than anything else. I'd say probably speculative fiction overall. I kind of genre blend here and there, back and forth. But definitely horror was what inspired me originally. It's what I've always read since I was, a teenager in high school, reading Stephen King and things like that from the used bookstore, old paperbacks and stuff. And just sort of, it wasn't until my senior year of college, I took a creative writing class, and that just really, really inspired me. And I was like, wow, I really love this. And this is what I want to do. Like, more so than reading, like, I want to write these stories for other people. So,
Awesome. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Baker's Dozen. I'm always curious about the kind of seed, the spark that leads to the story. So was there like an image or a concept or a character that kind of led you to the rest of the story?
I live on the coast up in Humboldt County, and
Okay.
we get a lot of really intense storms here. And unlike the rest of California further south, like our weather, when we get the king tides, our ocean gets big and gray and mean and scary. And so I think coastal horror like is really something that I could just write on and on about forever. I find it really inspiring. For this story specifically, um, it started like a lot of my other stories where it was like I just had a really simple concept. Like, wouldn't it be weird if, a dozen women were all pregnant at the same time? And nobody's really explaining why to you, but you get the feeling like maybe there's something going on behind that. And then you sort of explore that idea and unpack it like that. And it helps a lot that where we live too, that we find stuff on the beach a lot of the time and we have no idea what the hell it is. So that always factors in when I'm like with Baker's Dozen, including coastal and like sea creature type elements and things like that, but still not always knowing exactly what anything is.
Mhm. Yeah, and Humboldt is it's way up Northern California, right? Like almost to the Oregon border.
Yeah,
Nice. Yeah, there's something about the Pacific Northwest, I think, in general, because I don't know if you would you consider that to be a part of the Pacific Northwest or
I do.
borderline? Yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty far up here, and as far as the story goes, too, another inspiration for that is just because we're somewhat remote, we do have limited healthcare providers compared to a lot of other places in the state.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
For whatever reason, we don't have a ton of healthcare providers here. So that was kind of fun to play with the idea of like, well, what if there was an island and you had one doctor and a bunch of nurses and everybody knows what's going on but you?
Yeah, well, one thing I really love about this story is it's got a great economy of ideas. You know, it's very short. I think it's just under 2,000 words if I'm remembering
Mhm.
right. But it just seems like there's so much packed into those 2,000 words, like a whole kind of a self-contained universe. And it seems, yeah, all the details seem to be alluding to something like very specific. Does this story have a connection to any sort of mythos, maybe yours or someone else's mythos, or is it sort of fully self-contained?
It is self-contained, but this is, I would say, an earlier piece. I wrote this piece last year. This is definitely a piece that sort of started me toward working on the novel that I'm currently working on, which is sort of a weird coastal horror piece that's set in Humboldt County.
Hmm.
And so a lot of what I've been doing is focusing with my short fiction creatively on coastal horror and keeping it more local and sort of writing
Gotcha.
what I know and things like that. And so that's that's definitely contributed. But since then, I've written a couple of coastal horror stories that are sort of in the same vein. And then the novel, I would say, if anybody wants to get an idea of what the novel is going to be like, there's a very similar sort of mythos in that as well. But I do think, for me personally, anyways, it's very important to me as somebody who's writing these stories to not have a firm grasp of what exactly the big unknowable thing is. Like,
Sure, yeah.
I feel like for me, it's more fun if I don't have it set in stone, and
Mm.
I want the readers to be able to kind of make up in their own minds, like what exactly might be happening.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If it's a mystery to you, then it's an even better mystery to the reader, ideally, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But it does sort of hint towards some things that I am gonna get into in the book itself. So
Gotcha. So, speaking of your novel, and I know that you have another novel that came out a couple of years ago through Dark Matter Inc., I think, right? Our Love
yeah.
Will Devour Us.
Hmm.
So, now that you've kind of worked in both the short story and the novel medium, do you approach those forms differently? Whenever you're sitting down to work on a short story, is it maybe more spontaneous as opposed to like a more planned process for a novel? Or can you speak a little bit about that?
Uh, I'm kind of a chronic pantser. I really like to just start with an idea or a line or even a character or something. A lot of the times, most of the times with my short fiction, I have no idea where it's going to end.
Mm,
And especially with the weirder pieces like Baker's Dozen, I really like to start with an odd scenario and throw a clueless little character in there and then be like, do your best, man. Go. Let's see what happens. And kind of work from there. Sometimes I might figure out the ending ahead of time, but with long fiction, pretty similar. Like during my drafting process, I really like to throw everything on the table in terms of ideas and then
mhm.
figure out what I like thematically and all of that like later on. But it is, I think, with long fiction, time efficiency wise and all of that, and organization and ideas and stuff, I think it is a little bit more helpful for me to, once I have that first draft pantsed
Mm,
and out there and all my ideas and stuff, to sit down and really plot the future drafts so that they
sure.
come out how I want them to.
Yeah. I've noticed in my own work, because I've written a handful of novels, and every time that I've tried to overplan, it almost immediately goes off the rails, like within a few
Yeah.
chapters. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I get,
Especially if it's experimental. Like if it's
sure.
something I haven't done before, like the one that I just finished the first draft for, I spent about a year trying to sort of
Mm.
false start it. And okay, here I go again. And here I go again. And then no, actually, I'm going to outline this and I'm going to try to plot it and I'm going to try to be organized. And finally, I had to just say, you know what, you have this thing in your head. It's coming out one way or another. Just
Yeah.
let it out. It doesn't matter if it's a mess. Nobody is going to see it until the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth draft. Like,
Mhm.
get it out. And so that's what I ended up doing, is just pouring everything out at once. And yeah, it does end up being a mess, but it's a useful mess in
Yeah,
the long
yeah.
run. So,
I kind of think of it as like the mining draft, where you're just getting the raw materials that you
mhm.
need in order to turn it into something that's a little bit more structured.
Yeah, I think Stephen King in his book on writing, if I'm remembering correctly, he refers to it as sort of like uncovering a fossil. That
Yeah,
first
yeah.
draft, like it's just you and the story, and you are trying to get as much of this story out in one piece just for yourself the first time through, and then after that, you start worrying about presenting it to other people and other people
Mhm.
seeing it and it making sense. But it's really freeing in a way to just be able to just go nuts like that.
Yeah, yeah.
To just throw some really weird stuff on the page and be like, this makes no sense. Maybe it'll make sense later. We'll find out.
Got to figure it out. Yeah.
Yep.
So, how far into the process are you? Do you have your fossil draft done, and you're moving
I
on from
do.
that? Okay,
Yes,
awesome.
the fossil's done. I ended up putting it together as sort of a series of I don't know if you've read Fantastic Land.
I have not. I've heard some people talk about that one, but I'm not too familiar.
It's composed of like a bunch of different interviews which form a larger picture of an event that happened.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. My event is on a much larger scale, like a cosmic horror type scale. But yeah, it's basically going to be different interviews with people who are directly connected in some way. They have their own personal story that's related to this overall story that's going on, which is the main coastal horror story of the book. But yeah, I got that finished end of last year, and now I'm just letting it rest for like a month or two, kind of let everything settle, and then
Mhm.
I'll go back in and start doing the real work on it.
Yeah, no, I've always found that to be super helpful to just not try to not think about it for a while and then come back with the fresh
Yes.
eyes. It
And
helps.
and short fiction is great for that too,
Mhm.
because like it gets rough working on the same project like for months on end,
Oh yeah.
writing almost every single day, same ideas. But and of course, while that's going on, you have a million short story ideas that are just pelting you from the side. Like
Yeah.
you're trying to focus, you're like, nope, this is the one big project, and suddenly you have a million short story ideas. So what's been really helpful for me is during that downtime, I will focus on sort of restocking on my short stories
Sure, sure.
for the coming year because I try to do both. It's hard, but I try to do both. And that gives me a really good chance to sort of flex and develop all of these shorter, more compact ideas and play with different characters and stuff like that and sort of wipes my brain clean so that
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
come back to the novel, it's like, okay, I feel a little less personally attached to you and I feel like we can actually work now.
Yeah. And there's something so refreshing about with a short story starting it and then having a completed draft like I don't know, a week or 2 weeks later or however long it takes
Oh yeah. Yeah,
compared
yeah.
to months or even, years sometimes. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's really
that's
satisfying. It gives you a really good sense of accomplishment being able to get those done and it also, it reminds people that you're out there when you get your
yeah,
short
yeah,
stories published because some of these novels, it can take like a year or two to write and it can take even longer to find a publisher. So, it's
for
fun to
sure.
be able to like stay connected with readers in another way. Like
Hmm.
here's some of me but in smaller bites basically.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems like this is your third story through CHM, so you've kind of built up a little bit of a relationship with the editor. Am I right about that?
I think it's my second. I had Wrong
Okay, okay.
Bowls was first.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that was,
And this one?
yeah, yeah. I think that was last year. I love that cover. And
Yeah, it's a
then,
fun one.
yeah, this is my second one now, and I
Okay.
just submitted a third one to them, so we'll see if they want it.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So tell me about your what you've been reading lately. I'm always curious to hear what writers are feeding their brains with.
Yeah. Well, to get ready for the current project, the current novel I've been working on, I've been sort of for the last year reading a lot of found footage style horror,
Oh, nice.
epistolary, so books like Night Film or Fantastic Land. I love it's short fiction, but very, very, very helpful. Gemma Files, especially a lot of her recent short story collections. She
Oh,
gets
nice.
really weird and really freaky, and she does some amazing work with short stories and the found footage format, whether it's like audio snippets that she puts together or like video clips. Like she's extremely talented at taking something very raw and scary and then putting it in a format that's a little bit outside of the short story format. And that's really what I want to experiment with is that sort of mockumentary style delivery
Yeah,
where
yeah.
yes, you're reading a fiction book, but are you reading a fiction book? And that's what I love about that's what I love about these found footage style novels is that you are aware that you're reading fiction, but there's always a tiny part of your brain because of the format, like with
Yeah,
Blair Witch
yeah.
Project, you're like maybe.
Yeah, there's less of a wall between you and it than it feels like with a traditional novel, Just
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Great. So other than this story and your previous CHM story, if somebody's listening to this who was a big fan of Baker's Dozen and they want to check out maybe some more of your other stories, where else have you been published and where might they find that?
I've got Outlier and I believe one other story on Clark's World. Outlier is pretty hardcore. It's similar to Baker's Dozen in that you're not given a lot of answers into what is going on, but it's pretty hardcore on the ick factor.
Okay.
There's these people that are being, experimented on in a laboratory setting, and it doesn't give you a whole lot beyond that. But I really love it. It's one of my more messed up stories.
Awesome.
I also have one on Nightmare from a few years back that sort of has a little bit of a cosmic horror aspect to it, and that one is The First Year.
The First Year. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome that you got into Nightmare. That's one of those holy grail
Yeah.
publications.
Yeah, that one was a huge surprise. I had written the story for a different anthology because sometimes I like to write for themed anthologies.
Sure.
And I believe it was like Lost Contact or something. It was supposed to be like sort of technology related horror. And so this story addresses like a mother who gives birth to a newborn and she basically isn't 100%, she doesn't feel connected with the newborn. And so the story really plays with, is this postpartum? Is she hallucinating that this child has this strange sort of like godlike social media power because she and her husband are influencers and suddenly everyone is like just obsessed but with this baby. And
Okay.
so it brings up all these questions like, is it postpartum or is she really experiencing this? Like, why is everybody obsessed about it? Is it normal social media obsession or is there something more going on? And yeah, so that was a lot of fun. I was really stoked to get into Nightmare. I love.
Yeah, very cool. Impressive. Yeah, I have to check that out for sure. And so we know you have the new novel in the works. Do you have any other short stories forthcoming in anything?
Um, Not. Oh, I do actually. Eat the Rich. There's an anthology that's coming out
Hell
soon.
yeah, love that.
And I wrote a story for that, Swallow, which
Okay.
actually does play with the found footage format
Oh,
because it's
nice.
got little video clips and audio clips, and that's what the story is composed of. And it's essentially like this woman is. I'm trying to figure out how to describe it without giving anything away. This woman makes something happen that causes the ground to start swallowing corrupt rich people. And
Okay,
so,
I like
like
it.
for our time, it's going to be a very satisfying
Oh
story. It's
yeah,
going to be
yeah.
pretty cathartic given
Very
everything that's
timely.
been going on.
Yes.
But what's
Awesome.
funny is I wrote it back in 2020, so it's just become more relevant since.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
R.L. Meza is the author of Our Love Will Devour Us, Dark Matter Inc. 2023, with short stories in Clark's World and Nightmare Magazine. Meza writes speculative fiction from a not-haunted Victorian house on the coast of Northern California. Learn more at rlmeza.com. Thanks for joining us on Cosmic Goblins. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new story. Until then, check out the rest of the January issue of Cosmic Horror Monthly. This is a production of Randolph Literary Press. Once again, I'm your host, Alex Wolfgang. Our intro and outro music was composed by Tyler McLemore. Thanks again. See you next time.